so carefully and slowly that they wouldn't even know it had been done until it was merged together. That's
Absolutely.
Like the Rees Commission. This is all admitted, documented history, and they've almost reached that goal, but they still need the cooperation and the fear, it's done through fear, of the general public to go along with every step of it. They're using panic right now, panic after panic, and inoculations are next part of the panic.
Oh, I meant to get into that. I'll tell you what, Alan, if you can, do 2 more minutes on the other side, because I want to get your take on the whole swine flu pandemic. Fear, and then, of course, as we predicted, it came out, it is genetically manufactured, it is the government. And they as much as admit they're using it as a beta test for when they really release a controlled plague. And then Max Keiser's coming up. Stay with us. Okay, Max Keiser's joining us in a few minutes for the rest of the hour on the economy. We'll have open phones in as well. Alan Watt, in closing, you were mentioning the swine flu being a staged fear-mongering event. It has now come out, as we predicted, that it was man-made, manufactured. We knew that because it had no connection to any known natural strain. They're obsessed with setting precedents to force things into our body. We know worldwide they've been caught sterilizing and killing people with vaccines hundreds of times on record with different vaccines. So why would we trust them now to do it? With all the atomic soldiers and all the sterilized kids and all the tetanus shots with sterilization compounds? Go ahead.
Yes, and remember, too, these vaccines, etc., can lay a trigger in your body that might not activate for a few years, and down you go with crippling diseases or death. That's how fine an art biowarfare is. This is biowarfare. And you're right enough, the top man at one of the Centers of Disease Control admitted, he said, this virus was created in a lab. However, even though the symptoms really are very mild compared to the regular flu, it's almost like having a head cold for a day or two. The panic factor is working because people are flooding all emergency clinics each time the baby has a sniffle or someone gets an allergy or hay fever. They're overloading the hospitals to give this impression of terror and fear, and we cry to the masters to help us. We go back to the abuser to help us and to save us. That's the standard technique in the sadistic system that we're trained into.
Yeah, it trains everybody to be hypochondriacs, to go to the government to take your shots, and magically they're going to have the new shot for you ready in the fall and winter when the World Health Organization, the Eugenics Organization, says it's going to come kill all of us. I mean, this is ridiculous. These
Even though they admit that a virus keeps taking DNA from every victim, so every time it passes on to the next victim, it's an altered virus. So technically you cannot have an antidote to it.
Yeah, they admit they never have a flu vaccine that works.
That's right.
But the public doesn't know that. I mean, it's just, really, the globalists are just generational con artists and psychopaths that all intermarry and figure out new ways to screw the gullible, sweet public. I mean, it just gets more and more insane. Well, Alan Watt, we've already set you back up for July 1st for 2 hours at high noon Central, 1 p.m. Eastern. I look forward to talking to you then, Alan. CuttingThroughTheMatrix.com. People should get your books and videos there at CuttingThroughTheMatrix.com. We really appreciate you spending time with us.
Thanks for having me on, Alex.
It's always great having you. What a great guy. And now, for the next 50 minutes, we are joined from Paris by the syndicated radio host, BBC TV show presenter on the economy, Huffington Post writer. MaxKeiser.com is the website. That is his namesake for Max Keiser, the guest. And he is a filmmaker, broadcaster, former broker, and positions trader. And he is the inventor of a popular virtual specialist technology software used in many high-tech stock market systems today, like the Hollywood Stock Exchange. And joining us to give us his perspective on the economy and where this insanity, this looting is going, is Max Keiser from Paris. Welcome, Max.
Hey, Alex. How's it going? Thanks for coming on my show this past week. It's on the web. It's on the net now if people want to check it out.
You bet. MaxKeiser.com. Max, so much is going on. I'm going to try to sit back until the next break, and I've got more questions. And I'm not going to ask questions. What is most important? What is coming out of Max Keiser's brain first?
Okay. Well, I think you just have to read the financial news, and you get a good idea of what we can expect, what's going on. Just to go back, if you remember back in the 1999 period, that was when they repealed Glass-Steagall Act, which was in place since the Depression, to keep banks and brokers from getting each other's business. And that was one of the firewalls that kept the economy from becoming overly speculative and keeping the Ponzi schemes that were alive in the 20s to prevent them from coming back on stream. Well, that was repealed in 1999 with Greenspan, of course. Then in April of 2004, Greenspan and the SEC, they allowed the banks to change their what's called the capital ratios, the amount of assets that they keep on the books versus loans. It was for every dollar in assets, they could make roughly $12 in loans. They changed that so that for every dollar in assets, they could make $30 in loans. So it allowed the banks to keep a lot less capital on hand. It allowed them to do what we call structured finance. It allowed them to get involved in the global Ponzi scheme that eventually in 2006 and 2007 blew up, which caused the current crisis that we're still dealing with. So that brings us all the way up to the present. And in the present, just to give you an idea of how the rules and how the accounting rules, it's basically the crisis. If you look at it in terms of just how the accounting rules are misused, you get a sense that pretty much that's where the source of all of the fraud takes place. So here you have, just on April 2nd, accounting rules for banks came back into effect, which allows them to avoid having to value on their books the true value of these busted securities and busted bonds, the so-called mark-to-market standard. So in other words, if you had a bond on your bank's book and it had dropped by 80 or 90 or 95% in value, you don't have to declare that in fact has dropped that much in value. What you do is you determine that according to a computer model, the value of that security might be worth something in the future, and maybe under certain conditions, the so-called mark-to-model method. And since they allow that to be imposed, to be enforced, you've got situations, for example, where Citigroup, they just came out and they said, thanks to these changes, Citigroup was able to book $1 billion in gains for the quarter when, in fact, they're sitting on billions of dollars of losses. And it goes right down the line. Wells Fargo, of course, a similar situation. That's Warren Buffett's one of his big holdings. And so what this is all leading up to, Alex, is another leg of the banking meltdown. So we only had really the first leg, which started in the summer of 2007. That lasted about up until recently. And during that period of time, the banks, of course, are totally connected through Goldman Sachs and Tim Geithner and all the Goldman Sachs alumni and Robert Rubins and all these guys to the revolving door between the federal government and Goldman Sachs.